Staring ahead into space from the control chair of our racing flyer, I heard Whiteley's voice from beside me. 17 days, he was saying. And in 2 more days we ought to reach Earth. I nodded abstractedly, gazing ahead. 2 days at the most, I said. We're inside Jupiter's orbit now, and once through the asteroidal belt, there'll be nothing to delay us. For as Whiteley and I gazed outward, Marlin and Randall sleeping now in 2 of the space flyer's bunks, we could see that we were approaching, indeed, that belt of whirling asteroids that marked the division between the 4 inner and the 4 great outer planets of the solar system. To the left, dropping behind us, gleamed the gigantic cloud-belted sphere of Jupiter with its stately train of attendant moons, as great a mystery to us as when we first had passed it. A side force ray was holding the flyer out still from the mighty planet's attraction, while ahead and to the right from us now gleamed crimson Mars. Yet it was not these that held the eyes of Whiteley and myself, nor even the increasing fiery circle of the sun before us, but the bluish-white little spot of light that was expanding slowly in size and brilliance as we shot on toward it. The little spot of bluish light that was our planet, Earth. For days we had gazed toward that little light spot as our space flyer went on and on through the solar system's vast reaches toward it. For 17 days, now, even as Whiteley had said, we had been racing inward from Neptune at utmost speed on our desperate journey back to our own world. The space flyer's great rear force ray, pushing back against giant Neptune, had hurled the flyer in through the outer reaches of our universe with an acceleration of velocity that was so great as to prove almost our undoing. For more than once that terrific pressure of that acceleration on us, despite our shock-absorbing apparatus, had so affected our bodies as to overcome us with successive fits of nausea and unconsciousness. And once, just after we had swept in past great Saturn and its mighty rings, fearful of those great rings after our former misadventure with them, I had awakened from my sleep period to find Randall and Marlin in the control chairs, quite unconscious from the flyer's terrific acceleration, the flyer itself speeding onward without any guiding hand on its controls. Yet despite this, we had grimly driven the flyer to the utmost acceleration possible, its speed steadily mounting toward the maximum in those succeeding days that we flashed inward from Neptune. For behind us, Neptune's calm, green little disk of light, though diminishing steadily in size as we receded from it, seemed like a baleful signal of doom shining there behind us. For out from Neptune, or rather out from its moon Triton, the giant force ray of the Neptunians was still radiating toward the sun, thus shadowing all the solar system with the cataclysmic doom to come. For, as we flashed inward, Marlin had used his astronomical instruments to determine the fact that the sun's rotatory period had now decreased to a little over 8 days, and was decreasing still by the same amount of 4 hours each day, its spin accelerated each day by the same amount as the colossal force ray from Triton kept upon its side its unrelenting pressure. And within 100 days more, as we knew, that rotatory period of the sun would have decreased until its huge mass would be spinning once in every hour, would be spinning then so fast that it must inevitably be riven asunder into a new double star by its own centrifugal force, engulfing all its planets save Neptune alone. So it was that we spared not ourselves, but drove the space flyer in through the solar system toward Earth with a speed unthinkable, almost, using an acceleration that was all but death for us. For the one hope of preventing that colossal sun cataclysm, as Marlin had said and as we all knew, was to reach Earth soon, and then at once fly back from Earth toward Neptune again with the great space flyer fleet, which, if the World President and the World Congress had not failed us, would be waiting on Earth for us. With that fleet, we must sally back across the solar system once more to its outer edge, to great Neptune, and must fall upon Triton and the giant force ray that was shooting from Triton to the sun with all our power. If we could vanquish the Neptunians long enough to destroy the giant sunray's mechanism, to halt that ray, we would have halted the acceleration of the sun's spin, would have saved the sun and its planets from the cataclysmic doom that now threatened them. But if we could not, if the Neptunians, with their countless cylinders and great weapons, were too strong for us, then we could but perish there in struggling with them. since in that case, nothing could halt the doom that they were loosing from Triton upon the sun and the solar system. And as Whiteley and I gazed out through the flashing flyer's windows, we knew that scant enough was the time left for us in which to do these things. Even if we were safe on Earth in the next 2 days, as we hoped, there would remain but little more than 40 days before the coming of the dread cataclysm that threatened, and it would require half that time for the space flyers of Earth to make their way back out across the solar system to Neptune. So that now there lay over my mind that deepening shadow of impending colossal disaster that had hovered over all our minds during the strange days of our racing inward through the solar system, making me gaze somberly enough toward the bluish light spot in the darkness of space far ahead that was our goal now. To the left, though, Jupiter's great globe had dropped far behind now, and as I saw that, I cut out our side ray and turned toward Whiteley. "We're at the edge of the asteroidal belt now," I told him, "but I'm not going to slow our speed. We'll just flash on through it and take our chance." He nodded gravely. "I'll wake Marlin and Randall now to help me keep watch," he said. A moment later, having done so, Marlin and Randall freed themselves of the straps of the bunks and climbed across the flyer to take their places beside Whiteley in watching for the great menacing asteroids. And as we passed on through the belt of those whirling perils, Marlin and Whiteley and Randall watched for hour on hour there beside me, though so vast was the maximum speed at which our flyer was going now, more than 8 million miles an hour, that before they could more than get a flashing glimpse of a nearby asteroid, we would have passed it. We were relying almost wholly on blind chance to take us through the asteroidal belt at that lightning speed. Yet so desperate was this grim race back to Earth from the solar system's edge that we preferred to trust thus to chance, rather than to slow our speed or to delay by an hour our arrival on Earth. And chance, for the time, favored us, for some hours later we had won through the perils of the asteroidal belt without more than a few split-second glimpses of the great whirling spheres of peril. And then, as we shot across the orbit of Mars with the planet's dull red shield still farther to the right, I began to slow our terrific speed, for by this time the Earth was expanding rapidly before us. And now, too, the sun was flaming before us, in all the halo-like glory of its great corona, with a brilliance blinding to our eyes after the dim shades of Neptune and its moon. Yet even with that brilliance dazzling us, we could make out plainer and plainer the sphere of Earth, seeming to our eyes a thin silver-blue crescent as it spun there between our inrushing flyer and the sun, its tiny moonspot growing brighter too. Marlin and Whiteley and Randall watching tensely beside me, I cut out altogether the great force ray at the flyer's rear, which, even when our speed had reached its maximum, drove us straight onward and kept that speed unvarying against the gravitational influences from either side, which were not large enough to require an opposing side ray. Snapping that rear ray out, I sent another force ray from the flyer toward the Earth sphere ahead, and as that ray struck and pushed us back with immense power, the space flyer's colossal speed was gradually decreasing. Once more, we felt terrific upward and forward pressure in our chairs as the flyer's speed steadily slowed, dropped swiftly from 8 million miles an hour to 6, and then to 5, and then to 3. And as we shot in thus toward Earth, the millions of miles dropping slower behind as our flyer's great faceted ball clicked through space at slower and slower speed, I knew the same question was in the minds of my 3 friends as in my own. It was reflected in the tensely anxious eyes of Marlin and the imperturbable eyes of Whiteley and the unwontedly grave eyes of Randall as the 3 stared ahead with me. Would the space flyers that the World President and the World Congress had promised to build be ready? If not, we knew we certainly could not venture out to Neptune and put an end to the great doom ray that the Neptunians were stabbing toward the sun. So that it was in a growing suspense of spirit that we watched Earth's sphere, with its crescent of bluish-white light at one side, expanding before us. At ever slower speed, we were rushing in toward it, and at last, moving at but a few 100,000 miles an hour by this time, were driving in out of the void and past Earth's shining moon, gleaming in space to our right, its great ranges and strange craters clear to our eyes from its airless surface. But now all our eyes were on Earth ahead, since now, through the drifting cloud masses that floated in its atmosphere, we could make out the great bluish globe's surface features, could see that Western Europe and North Africa lay in the sunlight in that crescent of light at Earth's side, but that the North and South Americas lay in the shade of Earth's outer side, in the darkness of night. It was toward the dark, half-seen outline of North America that I was heading the flyer, for by this time, traveling still more slowly, our velocity now being less than 1,000 miles an hour, we were entering Earth's atmosphere, the rarefied air of its outer reaches roaring about the flyer as it shot through it. Straight to New York, to the World Congress, Marlin was saying. There's not a minute to lose. I nodded silently, at the same time snapping out the front ray of the flyer that was slowing our speed as we shot toward Earth's surface, and as its gravitation gripped the flyer, we were turning, until instead of rushing onward, we were falling to its surface from high above, as it turned in space before us, falling down toward the surface of the North American continent, whose outline was visible from our great height through the shifting cloud screen. I felt my heart beating rapidly as we shot thus downward, forgot almost the mighty import of the mission on which we were returning in the mere fact of our return, for we were first of all men to venture thus into the outer void, and to return from that void to Earth. And as we shot downward, I saw the same thought mirrored in the faces of the others, staring down with me. Down, down. With an oblique ray, I was making the space flyer fall slantingly, more and more slowly, toward the northeastern coast of the continent beneath, whose broad brown surface stretched out greater and greater beneath us. Moments more, and as the roar of air about us intensified, mingling with the throbbing of our generators, we shot down from the sun's light into the darkness of this dark side of Earth, this night of Earth's one side. But now its great surface was changing from convex to concave beneath us. And now, as we shot lower, still Randall pointed downward and northward with a low cry toward a spark of bright red light, the beam of the great air beacon of the transatlantic airliners at New York. Slower, slower. And in moments more the vast mass of its towering cylindrical buildings, ablaze with outlining lights, was coming into view, with midmost among them, the greatest of all, the huge mass of the World Government Building. As our space flyer dropped slowly toward that mighty structure beneath my controlling hands, as it dropped toward the swarms of bright-lit aircraft that were moving to and fro over the great city, so familiar was the scene beneath to us, 4 cosmic voyagers that almost did our great journey, our mighty flight out through the sun's planets, through the countless leagues of space to great Neptune, and our grotesque and dreamlike adventures upon Neptune and its moon, seemed to us indeed no more than dreams. But as we shot lower, we were startled from this strange state of mind by one of the aircraft beneath, showing the customary red and green position lights along its hull, driving up through the darkness toward our smoothly falling space flyer. We saw the 3 men in the control room of the craft gazing amazedly toward the gleaming, faceted metal ball of our flyer as they circled us, and then from their craft had burst out a score of brilliant, varicolored signal lights. And as these blazed out there came a moment later an answering blaze of lights from each of the swarming craft below that shot up now in hundreds toward our falling flyer, crowding crazily about it. Down through the darkness we dropped still, those swarms of aircraft almost jostling us as they seethed thickly in terrific excitement about us. As we shot downward over New York's surface, we saw that across all the vast city, and far across the great air docks to the south even, signal lights were blazing out, a wild panorama of bursting lights stretching out in all directions. From beneath, too, there came up to us now a terrific roar of mingled voices, the vast crowds in the streets of the huge city, sending their cheering cries up to us in a great thunder roll of sound as we fell toward them. And as I held the space flyer to its smooth drop downward amid the swarming aircraft, I saw that Marlin and Randall, and even Whiteley, were gazing across those vast, shouting throngs and across the swarms of madly darting aircraft that encircled us with somber, thoughtful faces. Now we were falling a few hundred feet above the roof of the World Government Building, on which a little knot of figures awaited us, and as I gazed from it across the other roofs of the great city, I uttered a low exclamation. "On the roofs, you see?" I asked. "Those things of metal, those space flyers." But they too were gazing toward the roofs, toward the innumerable crystal-like metal forms that we could half recognize on those roofs in the darkness. But a glimpse only we had of them before the space flyer was sinking downward to the great roof itself, and as Marlin saw the knot of figures on that roof, he half turned. "The world president," he said quietly, "waiting for us on the roof." That roof's flat expanse was just beneath us, covered itself with other great crystal-like gleaming flyers, but with a clear space at its center where once had stood our space flyer's framework. There was no framework there now, but smoothly I brought the flyer down upon that space, down to the roof, poised it a moment a foot above it, and then let it sink to the roof's surface and opened a half-dozen of the switches before me, the throbbing of the generators that had been enduring for so long ceasing and giving way to an unaccustomed silence that was strange to our ears. Then Marlin had turned, was opening the inner door, and in another moment the outer one had swung open also, a flood of cool, clean air rushing in upon us. Marlin leading, we stepped out, stood unsteadily for a moment on the great roof's surface, beneath the brilliance of the lights that flared above it. From beneath and above came still through the night the unceasing roar of the great crowds in the more huge city's streets and the hum of its swarming, seething aircraft. And then we saw that the little group of men on the roof beside us were coming toward us, the world president at their head. His strong, keen eyes were steady upon us as he came forward, his hands outstretched, and then he had gripped our own hands, was holding them for a moment in silence. In that moment we were all four swaying a little as we stood there, gazing about us at the far-flung lights of the great city around us, at the men before us, at the strangely dulled stars overhead, as though never had we seen them before. When the world president spoke, his human-sounding voice seemed strange even to our ears. "Marlin, Randall, Whiteley, Hunt," he said. "You have come back then from your mission?" "We've come back from Neptune," Marlin said simply. "The World Congress is already gathered, is waiting for you," said the other, as simply, and then with him and the officials about him, we were walking toward the stair opening in the great roof. We're walking through ranks of the great looming, faceted things of metal that I saw now clearly were replicas, each of our own polyhedron-like space flyer. Down through that opening we went, down stairs after stairs, until we were emerging through a hall on the raised platform at the end of the great room in which the World Congress awaited us. Brilliant white light flooded that room, and in it, in silent row upon row, were seated the 1,200 members of the great Congress. As we four entered, with the world president and his officials, there was turned instantly toward us every eye, and a tense hush of utter silence settled, in which our own steps seemed loud to our ears. There were no shouts or cheering cries from the Congress members in that moment, for all knew that what they were to hear now from us was the word of hope or hopelessness for Earth, the report of our great mission upon which rested Earth's single chance for life. And as I stared across the great silent Congress in that moment, there flashed upon the screen of my mind, strangely enough, a picture of that other silent, solemn council, before which Marlin and I had stood but a few days before, that council of 30 of the strange Neptunians whose great synthesizing globe mechanism had spoken to us. Then, as we stood there, the world president was stepping forward to address the Congress. "There is no need for me to tell you who are the four men standing here before you," he said. "Marlin, Whiteley, Randall, Hunt, these four who went out to Neptune on the Earth's behalf, and whom Earth has tensely awaited now for weeks. I do not know, any more than you, what they found there, what chance for Earth they found, or failed to find. And it is that we, the representatives of the world's peoples, now wait to hear from Marlin, the leader of this great expedition." Utter silence held all present. And as the world president stepped back, Marlin, unsteady still from our unaccustomedness to Earth's gravitation, and with face drawn but eyes steady and bright, was stepping forward, Facing the great rank on rank of members of the World Congress he stood, while we others slipped into the seats behind him, facing them for a moment in tense silence as he summoned his energies to speak. In that moment, as my eyes roved across the great hall, I made out the faces of many there known to me. The face, just beneath our platform, was that of my chief at the Intelligence Bureau, Markham, the faces of many others, strange and yet familiar, all turned now toward Marlin. And then, in a voice low at first but gaining in power as he went on, Marlin was speaking to them, his words sounding out through the great room in a hushed, unnatural silence. He began by reviewing in a few sentences the colossal peril that had threatened and was threatening us, the increased spin of the sun beneath Neptune's mighty ray that soon must result in its division and the solar system's doom. Hen, with a reference to that other gathering of the World Congress at which our venture out to Neptune had been decided upon, he came to the start of that venture. While they listened in utter tenseness, he told of our start, of our going out from Earth, first of all men into the outer void, out past the mysteries of Mars with greater and greater speed. Our onward flight through the terrible dangers of the great asteroidal belt and our narrow escapes in it, our outward rush past mighty Jupiter. These he described in his steady voice, and we felt the tenseness that held all in the great room in dead silence. He told them of what doom had nearly been ours at Saturn, of our fall toward its great rings of death and our narrow escape from them. Then, with a little pause, he was going on, was telling of our onward, flashing flight beyond Saturn, out through the vast outer reaches of the solar system, out past the orbit of Uranus toward Neptune itself. In utmost suspense, they listened as he told of our arrival at last at Neptune, of our amazement at finding that giant world shielded with an enclosing roof of metal, and of our greater amazement at finding that world, the colossal city that covered it, utterly dead and deserted. Low exclamations of surprise broke from his listeners then as he narrated how he and I had been surprised in the dead city of Neptune by the coming of the Neptunians in their cylinders, their attack upon and pursuit upward of Whiteley and Randall in the space flyer, their capture of ourselves, and their taking us from Neptune out to the moon world of Triton. And a low wave of uncontrollable excitement swept across the great room as Marlin told those in it of the roofed and warmed world of Triton and the countless millions of Neptunians on it, and above all, of the giant force ray that was stabbing from Triton's sunward side toward the sun and loosing doom upon us. And that excitement intensified when he told of what else we had found at Triton, of the other giant force ray stabbing out from its other side toward a distant star of Sagittarius, of our captivity there and our learning of the Neptunian tongue, our being brought before the great council of 30 of the Neptunian races. I saw the hundreds before us, listening with abated breath, as he told them that gigantic epic of the solar system's past that had been told us by the great globe mechanism of the council, that story of the Neptunians, past history, and of the great doom of increasing cold that had driven them from Neptune to Triton, and that now had caused them to seek to split the sun itself to thwart that doom. How they had sent out toward that star in Sagittarius another great force ray years before, to brace Triton against the back pressure of the sun ray and to keep it from being hurled out into the great void. How they had finally sent out the great force ray toward the sun also, turning the sun ever faster toward the doom of all the other planets, planning to wreck the universe to save their own race. These things he told them through the hushed silence that again had replaced their stir and murmur of excitement. But excitement held them again when he told how he and I, desperate at the doom we saw hanging thus over Earth, had made our wild attempt to escape from Triton, had dared to cross its surface, and had stolen a cylinder, crashing up through the great roof and out from Triton in that cylinder, with their pursuit close behind us. How we had been saved from that pursuit by Whiteley and Randall in the space flyer, who, although we had thought them dead, had managed to elude their own attackers by a ruse and had hovered near Triton in hopes of saving us. How in the space flyer we had fled back from Triton over Neptune and had smashed our pursuers, while we and they were over Neptune, These things, his voice deep now, he told to the hundreds of his listeners. And then, swaying a little from sheer utter weariness of body and spirit, Marlin told them, we, knowing that never alone could we halt or even reach that giant ray driving from Triton toward the sun, had headed back for Earth at the utmost speed of which we were capable, had flashed back like some great messenger meteor through the solar system to Earth, to carry to the peoples of Earth word of what we had found, to gather the forces of Earth and head back to Neptune with them for a last gallant attempt to halt that mighty ray of doom. When Marlin's voice had ceased, when he had stepped unsteadily back from the platform's edge, his words seemed reverberating still through the hushed silence that prevailed among the 1,200 massed members of the World Congress. Then again the World President, his own face as set and strange now as those of the massed members before him, was stepping forward to face them. "You have heard the report of Dr. Marlin and his 3 companions," he said quietly. "And you, and I, and the peoples of Earth listening now, know what situation faces us, what last necessity, even as was foreseen, has arisen before us. That giant force ray of which Marlin told you, that colossal ray which these Neptunians are stabbing toward the sun's edge from their far moon world of Triton, is turning the sun ever faster, as all of you know, is decreasing its rotatory period by 4 hours each passing day. Within hardly more than 40 days, it will have decreased the sun's rotatory period to that fatal period of 1 hour, will have increased its spin to that critical fatal speed, at which the sun must inevitably divide into a double sun, a double star, engulfing our planet and almost all others in fiery death in that cosmic cataclysm. This is known to you, and you know, too, that it is only by halting that giant force ray from Triton that we can save our sun, our world, from that tremendous cataclysm. This much we have known, indeed, and now with what knowledge these 4 men have brought back from their unparalleled venture out through the gulf of space to the solar system's edge, to Neptune itself, you know also what lies before us. We have, indeed, built during the absence of Marlin and his 3 friends that great fleet of space flyers, which we had decided to build, using the plans of their original space flyer and applying all our efforts toward achieving a quantity production of space flyers on those plans. We have been able, as you know, to construct in their absence no less than 5,000 space flyers exactly like their own, space flyers that rest now upon the roofs of New York's great buildings around us, complete now with trained crews and ready to start. The gathering of Earth's forces has thus already taken place. And upon this great fleet of space flyers rests now the fate of the solar system. For that fleet must go out through the solar system now to Neptune and halt the giant ray radiating from Triton's sunward side toward the sun, if the solar system is to live. What perils, what opposition that fleet will meet, Marlin has made clear to you. These Neptunians, most ancient and mighty of the solar system's peoples, are of colossal powers, such powers that they are scrupling not at splitting the sun itself. They have thousands of their great space cylinders that can whirl through space as swiftly and as well as our own space flyers. They have as weapons their concentrated force rays, which we must provide for the flyers of our own fleet before it leaves. They have an ancient science and might that can produce we know not what weapons against us, and they know that our 4 first venturers escaped back to Earth, and will be expecting now an attack from us, will resist that attack with all their powers, undoubtedly, since they are fighting for the existence of their races, their world, even as we are fighting for ours. Thus this great fleet of 5,000 space flyers of ours goes out to battle between the races of Neptune and Earth that must decide the fate of the Sol, our system for all time. There can be but one fit to lead this fleet out to such battle, and that is Marlin himself, who was the first to discover this peril that hangs over us, who was one of the first to suggest a means of struggling against that peril, and who has led this first daring venture out through 1,000 perils to Neptune, and back again to Earth, with the knowledge without which we could not act. So that it is he, with these 3 companions of his, Whiteley and Hunt and Randall, who dared all with him, and who have done for Earth what he has done, as his 3 lieutenants, who must command this great expedition of ours, which we are sending out to halt the oncoming doom, these gathered forces of all the earth. For it is this great fleet of space flyers, with Marlin at its head, which alone can halt that doom now. If that fleet can win safely out through the perils of the interplanetary void to Neptune, can win to Triton's sunward side against the opposition of the Neptunians, and can destroy the controls and generators of their great sun ray, can halt that ray, the sun's spin will cease to accelerate, and our planet and the other planets will have been saved. But if our fleet cannot do this, if the Neptunians prevent it from reaching the great sun ray's source, and from halting that ray, then the sun will spin on ever faster, and within 20 more days will split at last, and engulf in the diverging fires of its two new suns, all the planets save Neptune. For it is this great space fleet of ours, heading out now toward the last great battle of Earth's and Neptune's races, which alone now can prevent the accelerating speed of the sun and the consequent wrecking of our universe.